This is the Retro XP Podcast, a podcast dedicated to retro video games from the first and second generation with the Odyssey, Atari 2600, and a television all the way up to the Generation 7 with Xbox 360, PS3, and Wii. Today on this episode, this very special episode, we'll be talking about the Halo franchise going up to Halo Reach, or, if anything, the Bungie years. Bungie was the first team to develop the Halo franchise, starting with Combat Evolved on the Xbox and ending on a very high note with Halo Reach on the Xbox 360. Since then, it has moved on to the Destiny franchise, and 343 Studios picked up the reins with mixed results by the fan base. Players in their 30s and 40s, one group that I'm a part of, now remember fondly the days when the Halo franchise was the reigning king of first-person shooter campaigns and multiplayer. Today's episode will be an interesting one, as we won't go into a deep dive into every game in the franchise like I've done in the past, but to talk about how Halo was the dominant force in those times and how difficult it can be for the franchise to return to its roots, so to speak. I'll be talking a little bit about story. There will be a little bit of spoiler territory with a lot of the stories, but most of these games are over 20 years old at this point. So I would bank on you. If you're listening to this episode, you have played and completed the majority of these games. I hope you enjoy this episode. And with that, let's get started. Retro XP is now part of the Hair of the Dogcast network, joining the likes of Raw Dogs, Zombie Dogs, Elden Dogs, and of course the flagship Hair of the Dogcast podcasts. You'll most likely find me in a few of those podcasts, most notably Zombie Dogs, where all we talk about is the Resident Evil series, so be sure to check that out. It's fun content. The network has tons of bonus content and episodes on Patreon at patreon.com/Hair of the Dogcast. So help support us by donating and not only getting access to those early access and Patreon exclusive episodes, but also access to the Discord community, exclusive to Patreon members with a minimum of $3 a month. There's a room exclusive to Retro XP in there where we talk about retro video games and episode discussions. Otherwise, you can follow me on X, Threads, and Instagram at RetroXPodcast. Whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on, be sure to follow and enable notifications so you can find out when I drop a new episode. Episodes are also live on YouTube, and follow me there at RetroXPodcast. I've also got a few pieces of video content on there too, where I talk about some pickups and then I share a little bit of my video game collection. So I started to reflect on this topic right after watching a recent trailer for the Halo Campaign Evolved game. This is a complete remake of the original campaign that's slated to come out in 2026. Now, if you have been around the Xbox space for a long time, you know that the Halo Master Chief Collection came out, I want to say a little bit less than 10 years ago, maybe more than 10 years ago, where they did kind of do a remaster of the original Halo game. And it was kind of a cool concept because you got it for the Xbox One at the time, and you can actually switch between old graphics and new updated graphics, and they made a few changes that kind of divided the fan base, but we still got a remaster that you can play in glorious 1080p 4K quality. But this is something completely different. This is almost like a built from the ground up, and a few quality of life adjustments that it's probably always going to divide the Halo fan base, but that's just the way it goes. The biggest shocker for me with this was, for the first time ever, a Halo game is coming to PlayStation 5. And this is the first time any Halo game has jumped platforms, with the exception of PC, obviously. But the Microsoft ecosystem is kind of plays friendly with PCs. While I'm, in this case, I'm happy for PS5 owners and PlayStation fans in general who maybe have never owned an Xbox system ever in their life, that, I'm excited that they'll finally be able to play a Halo game. It did lead me down the rabbit hole to wonder how the hell we got to this point with such an iconic Xbox exclusive franchise. I mean, this isn't anything new. We've seen this before in the past. Many of us were dumbfounded. I don't know if you were there, but many of us were dumbfounded when we first saw Sonic the Hedgehog released on a Nintendo system, which, if you don't know, I had to actually Google this. It was Sonic Adventure 2, which came out on the GameCube in 2001 after Sega announced that it was abandoning hardware manufacturing. They had the Dreamcast at this time, and it didn't sell as well as they wanted. They were probably losing money, so they were like, all right, we're out, which sucks. This is similar in a way. We are seeing Master Chief now on a Sony system. And I mean, there's a lot of discussion to be had around how far Xbox has fallen in recent years. And honestly, that requires, I would think, a series of episodes that could start way back with the Xbox One reveal. If you would know, I would say YouTube that if you're curious what I'm talking about. And admittedly, that conversation has been beaten to death with highs and lows for the Xbox brand following afterwards. So it's been their ups and downs. And, I think it's a matter of subjective opinion with, if you think Xbox is making the right moves now with how the video game space is now. But that's a whole, like I said, whole series of episodes. But this is a retro gaming podcast. We're talking about retro stuff. Bungie was the developer that first created the Halo franchise. They began the development of what would eventually become Halo way back in 1997. Initially, the game was a real-time strategy game that morphed into a third-person shooter before becoming a first-person shooter. During development, Microsoft acquired Bungie and turned Halo into a launch game for its first ever video game console, the Xbox. Halo was a critical and commercial success and is often praised as one of the greatest video games ever made. I'd put that up there. I mean, it hit pretty big. It was critically acclaimed for its graphics, soundtrack, and multiplayer in particular. And with the game's popularity, which I'm going to talk about later, led to labels such as Halo clones and Halo killers, which applied to games either similar to or anticipated to be better than it. Its sequel, Halo 2, was released in 2004, and after that, the game spawned a multi-billion-dollar multimedia franchise that incorporated games, books, toys, animated films, a TV series, which we're not going to talk about. So, more than 6 million copies of Halo Combat Evolved have been sold worldwide by November of 2005. A remaster of the game, like I had talked about earlier, Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary, was released by 343 Industries on the 10th anniversary of the original game's launch. Halo Combat Evolved takes place in a 26th century science fiction setting. Faster than light travel called slipspace allows the human race to colonize planets other than Earth. The planet Reach serves as an interstellar hub of scientific and military activity. The United Nations Space Command, which I'm probably gonna say UNSC for the future part of this episode, develops a secret program to create augmented super soldiers known as Spartans. More than 20 years before the beginning of the game, a technologically advanced collective of alien racers called the Covenants begins a religious war against humanity, declaring them an affront to their gods. The Covenant has it. I feel like talking about the Covenant and their lore and their beginnings is almost an episode in and of itself, because the Covenant have a few different races and a few different species within their ranks, which is, interesting conversation to have or interesting lore to go into, but we're not going to go there at this point. Humanity's military experiences a series of crushing defeats. Although the Spartans are effective against the Covenant, they are too few in number to turn the tide. In 2552, Covenant forces attack Reach and destroy the colony. In order to speak on the story as a whole, we should start here with the last game that Bungie released in the 5-part series, Halo Reach. So Reach came out in September of 2010. The game takes place in this time, like I mentioned, 2552. Humanity is locked into a war with this, alien species called the Covenant, which seeks to exterminate humanity. Players play as Noble Six, a member of an elite squad of super soldiers known as Noble Team, attempting to stage a defense in the human world known as Reach, which falls under Covenant attack. So before Reach came out, and they had released Halo 3 in 2007, Bungie split into two teams to develop two different games, which one of them would be Halo 3 ODST and Reach. developers decided to create a prequel to the original Halo game trilogy, freeing themselves from the obligation of addressing old story threads and just keeping things going. They were trying to get out of the Halo series, so this was probably the safest bet. As the game would take place on a human world doomed to be destroyed, they focused on making the environment a character unto itself. Longtime Halo composers Martin O'Donnell and Michael Salvatore returned to compose Reach's music, aiming for a more somber sound to match the story, which the Reach soundtrack is a really good soundtrack. The game grossed $200 million on its first day, setting a new record for the franchise. So back to the story, humans under the auspices of the UNSC have been waging this long war against the Covenant. The planet Reach is home to over 700 million civilians, in addition to the military presence there. So when I talked about Noble Team, Noble Team's leader is Carter, a no-nonsense soldier. Noble 6 is a new... You don't really have a name. You don't really see your face. You have a voice, and you're a new recruit. You've been a Spartan for a while, but you're new to Noble Team, so not a lot of people greet you warmly in the beginning of this game. Carter's second in command is Catherine, referred to other team members as Kat. She has a bionic arm, which she's really cool. Carter and Kat are the only remaining original members of Noble Team. The other current members include Heavy Weapons Specialist, who was as part of the Spartan 2 program, George, and Assault Specialist Emil, and Marksman June. Noble 6 meets the rest of Noble Team, and shortly before that, they are dispatched to investigate why a communications relay has gone offline. They discover Covenant forces have invaded Reach, unfortunately. The team is relocated to Defense Sword Base in an Office of Naval Intelligence, or ONI. You may hear me refer to it as ONI, so Office of Naval Intelligence, from a Covenant assault. After repelling the attack, Noble Team meets Catherine Halsey, a scientist and the mastermind behind Spartan program and their Mjolnir power armor. I would highly suggest reading the book, because it goes a little bit more in depth with a lot of how the Spartans were made, a lot of background into who Dr. Halsey is, and of course the Mjolnir power armor, and how they developed it off of Covenant technology. Halsey inquires about Noble's engagement at the relay, suspecting that the Covenant were attempting to retrieve highly classified ONI data from the site, which we'll talk about later, what that data is. June and 6 discover an invasion force gathering on the planet, and the UNSC launches an assault the next morning to repel the invasion. Noble Team assists in the strike force, targeting key artillery stations and command posts, and they're also entrusted with transporting the artificial intelligence Cortana and her data on the artifact to the UNSC ship Pillar of Autumn, which is docked at a shipyard. This is probably the biggest, space ship, or whatever you call it, I think in the UNSC Navy, so to speak. June leaves the team to escort Halsey to safety. Much later, after Noble 6 is successful in delivering Cortana to the Pillar of Autumn, you participate in, still to this day, one of the most iconic and emotional endings to any video game. Objective, survive. If you know what I'm talking about, you know. If you don't, I highly encourage you to play this game after you're done listening to this episode. It is, man, it gives me goosebumps every time, and it's always a challenge to try to really, really survive. So, Halo Combat Evolved takes place almost immediately after Reach. At the end of Reach, the Pillar of Autumn escapes and goes into slip space to escape the Covenant. Combat Evolved begins as the Pillar of Autumn exits slip space, and its crew discovers a large ring world structure of unknown origin. We know this to be called Halo. The Covenant pursues the Pillar of Autumn and attacks. With the ship heavily damaged, the Pillar of Autumn's captain, Jacob Keyes, entrusts the ship's artificial intelligence, known as Cortana, to Master Chief in order to prevent the Covenant from discovering the location of Earth. Keyes orders the crew to abandon the Pillar of Autumn and pilots the ship to a crash landing on the Ring World, or Halo in this case. On Halo's surface, Master Chief and Cortana rescue scattered survivors and help organize a counteroffensive against the Covenant. Learning that Keyes has been captured by the Covenant, Master Chief and a small contingent of soldiers rescues him from the Covenant cruiser Truth and Reconciliation. I just love that name so much for some reason. I just love the ship names that Bungie has created in this series. Keyes reveals that the Covenant call the Ring World Halo and that they believe it to be a weapon. Intent on stopping the Covenant from using Halo, Keyes searches for a potential weapons cache while Master Chief and Cortana mount an assault on the Ringworld's control room. Cortana enters Halo's computer systems and, after discovering something horrifying, sends Master Chief to find and stop Keyes from continuing his search and uncovering what lies within the ring. So what she finds is basically what the Halo ring is intended to do is to destroy all sentient life in the galaxy, to basically fight the Flood. Master Chief retrieves the ring's activation index and discovers this AI that's maintaining the Halo called Guilty Spark. Guilty Spark wants to help activate Halo's defenses, but of course, Cortana discovers that the purpose of this installation is to destroy all sentient life in the galaxy and fighting against the Flood. During his time on Halo, this parasite alien species called the Flood is basically is just like killing everybody. It's like this kind of like disease that can infect the galaxy of all sentient life, and the Halo weapons were designed to destroy and starve the Flood from spreading, because the Flood needs other sentient life to basically thrive and live. So when Cortana refuses to surrender Halo's activation index, 343 Guilty Spark attacks her and Master Chief, and the game ends with you activating the Pillar of Autumn's reactors and blowing it to bits, thus destroying Halo and its ability to be used as a weapon. And the Flood also overtook the crew on the Pillar of Autumn. So in this case, the fight has only just begun for Master Chief and Cortana, and this is where we cement Master Chief as probably one of the most iconic video game. I hesitate to use the word mascot because he's really not a mascot, but one of the most iconic protagonists in video game history. So naturally, after the success of Halo Combat Evolved, a sequel was expected and highly anticipated, I would say. I think Microsoft knew what they were making, and Bungie was like, okay, I guess we're going with this, which, was met with mixed results by a lot of people on the Bungie team, and, we'll talk about that later. Bungie found inspiration in plot points and gameplay elements that had been left out of their first game, including something like online multiplayer. A troubled development and time constraints forced cuts to the scope of the game, including the wholesale removal of a more ambitious multiplayer mode, and necessitated a cliffhanger ending to the game's campaign mode. So now we move into Halo 2, in this case, which opens up, interesting enough, with a trial of a Covenant elite commander aboard the Covenant's capital city ship called High Charity. Now, this is where a lot of people were kind of dumbfounded and a little shocked that now you can actually you can actually see more of the lore and the story of the Covenant. And, well, I mean, you don't feel sorry for them, but you get a little context as to why they're doing what they're doing. For his failure to stop Halo's destruction, the Elite is stripped of his rank, branded a heretic, and tortured by Tartarus, who's the chieftain of the Covenant brutes. Spared from his execution, the Covenant leadership, the High Prophets Truth, Regret, and Mercy give this Elite the chance to become an Arbiter, a rank given to elites in time of great crisis or turmoil. As the Arbiter, the Elite quells a rebellion and recovers 343 Guilty Spark, who survived the explosion on Halo in the first game. So we all call him Arbiter now in this case. On Earth, Fleet Admiral Hood commends the Master Chief and Sergeant Avery Johnson for their actions at the first Halo, and Commander Miranda Keyes accepting a medal on behalf of her deceased father, Captain Jacob Keyes, who died in the first game. A Covenant fleet suddenly appears near Earth. In the ensuing battle, a single ship carrying the Prophet of Regret slips through Earth's defenses and besieges the African city of New Mombasa. Master Chief assists in repelling this invasion. With his fleet destroyed, Regret makes a hasty slip space jumping. Keyes, Johnson, Cortana, and Master Chief follow aboard the UNSC ship in Amberclad. In Amberclad, that's the name of the ship, not Amberclad. The crew discovers another Halo installation, shocking. Realizing the danger the ring presents, Keyes sends Master Chief to kill Regret, while she and Johnson search for the Index, Halo's activation key, which we saw this before in the first game. The Arbiter meets the Master Chief in the bowels of Halo, brought together by a flood creature called the Gravemind. The Gravemind reveals to the Arbiter that the Great Journey is a lie, and sends the two soldiers to different places to stop Halo's activation. Of course, in the end, shocking, we can't really trust Gravemind. But for context, the Great Journey is a religious goal for the Covenant, and they believe that in their lore or in their religious texts that activating the Halo rings will lead them to transcendence or godhood through a divine wind that elevates them to a spiritual state. Though this is a misinterpretation of the Halo's true purpose as a weapon to destroy the Flood by extinguishing all sentient life simply to starve the Flood. So, shocking. Religious texts being misinterpreted. In the end, when the Arbiter tries to convince Tartarus that the prophets have betrayed them, seeing that they've known about this all along, Tartarus instead activates the ring, and of course the battle ensues. The Arbiter and Johnson kill Tartarus, while Keyes removes the index. The unexpected deactivation sends Halo and all the other rings within the known galaxy on standby for remote activation from a place 343 Guilty Spark calls the Ark. Meanwhile, Truth's ship arrives at Earth, and Master Chief informs Admiral Hood that he is, quote, finishing the fight, which becomes one of the most iconic lines, I think, in Halo history. During the events of Halo 2, we got Halo ODST, which it became the fourth installment in the Halo franchise, and it was released on 360 in September 2009. Players assume the role of United Nations Space Command Marines known as Orbital Drop Shock Troopers, or ODSTs, during and after the events of Halo 2. In the game's campaign mode, you're exploring the ruined city of New Mombasa to discover what happened to their missing teammates in the midst of this alien invasion. At the end of Halo 2, like I said before, UNSC manages to repel most of the fleet, and with that Truth ship that basically engages a slip space jump, it creates this massive shockwave that basically destroys a lot of what's around New Mombasa and everything. While the rest of Halo 2's storyline follows the ship to an ancient installation similar to the first Halo, ODST focuses on the aftermath of this shockwave while the Covenant still occupy the city. The game's protagonist is called Rookie, a new member of the group of the ODSTs. His teammates are Buck, Dutch, Romeo, Mickey, and Dare. I love these names. The lattermost is a UNSC office of a UNS ONI agent in charge of the squad's operations. Troopers, known as the ODSTs, or they call them Hell Jumpers too, they basically I don't want to say their shtick, but their role is they often deploy in small one-man human entry vehicles, or in the lore they call them HEVs, which is a single-occupant exo-atmospheric insertion vehicle. And they're launched from spaceships into the upper atmosphere. Yeah, I mean, you've seen this a lot in a lot of sci-fi movies where drop pods come, and they're basically just, little metallic drop pods that drop into and land on the ground, and then basically single soldiers pop out and start fighting and don't get their spines completely morcellated. I don't know how it happens, but this is the 26th century, so technology is probably much better than what we have now. The Rookie is assisted in finding his teammates by Mombasa City's maintenance AI, which is called the Superintendent, or Virgil. They call him Virgil, I think, mostly in this case. The game does tell a story through a series of flashbacks, which is really cool. If you've played the game, you'll know that in one of the beginning parts of the game, there's this melancholic piano song that pops on, and it's a cut scene where your soldier Rookie just like kind of pauses and reflects on the rain just like hitting his armor. And it's such a small part in the game, but it became so iconic and so memorable that it's like I still hear that piano music like every time it rains for some reason if I'm outside. I don't know. It's just still that it hits me to this day still. Wild. So with these flashbacks, it eventually comes to the present day when Rookie and Dare begin making their way to the Superintendent's data core. When they get to the data core, they find it possesses information on something the Covenant is actually looking for underneath the city. Inside this core, they discover a Covenant engineer that has combined the Superintendent into itself. Dare explains that the engineers are, quote, biological supercomputers that have been enslaved by the Covenant, and the one that they found actually wishes to defect to the humans. With the engineer's information on the Covenant combined with the Superintendent's data, Dare's mission changes from downloading the data and escorting the alien to safety. The Rookie and Dare and the engineer reunite with Buck and fight their way out of the city, where they reunite with the rest of the squad. As they fly away in this hijacked dropship, the squad watches as the Covenant ships destroy Numbasa and excavate a massive alien artifact, a Forerunner artifact. Ugh. Forerunner artifact. So this is kind of the first of how we hear about the Forerunners, which was you'll find out later in the Halo games, especially when you get to Halo 4, is a kind of like a ancient sentient alien race that predated the Covenant and of course humanity. After this, we got Halo 3, which was released on September 2007 on the Xbox 360, and this grossed $170 million on its first day of release and to $300 million within its first week. The game sold 14.5 million copies and was the best-selling video game of 2007, I want to say, by a long shot. More than 1 million people played Halo 3 on Xbox Live in the first 24 hours, which is wild. Halo 3 at this time did something different. Once it made the jump to new hardware, you can actually play 4-player co-op now, which is really cool, but with different characters. In the past, when you played as Halo 1 and 2, you were all different Spartan versions, different versions of Master Chief, so to speak. But in this one, you actually play as separate different characters. The first player plays as Master Chief, the second player as the Arbiter, and the final 2 players you're controlling Covenant elites, Intho Saram and Yusei Taham, which I don't know if I'm saying those names right. It's been a long time since I played Halo 3. So I hope I did that justice. So Halo 3 kind of happens after a comic tie-in called Halo Uprising. The Master Chief, in this case, obviously arrives on Earth and into East Africa, where he's founded by Johnson and the Arbiter. The Chief and company return to a UNSC outpost where Keyes and Lord Hood plan a final effort to stop the Covenant leader, the High Prophet of Truth, from activating this Forerunner artifact that the Covenant have excavated after the events of ODST. The Chief clears anti-air Covenant defenses so Hood can lead the last of Earth's ships against the Prophet, but Truth activates the buried artifact, creating a slip-space portal which he and his followers enter. A flood-infested ship crashes nearby, and elite forces arrive and vitrify the flood-infected areas of Earth, stopping the threat. Following a message Cortana left aboard this flood ship, the Chief, Arbiter, elites, Johnson, Keyes, and their troops follow Truth through the portal, so they're actually working with the Covenant elites in this case. So it's, behind the scenes, we're seeing almost like a civil war with the Covenants at this time. So it's interesting that humanity and these Covenant elites are now fighting side by side for against the flood, so to speak, and then also fighting other Covenant and armies that are on the other side of the Civil War. Joining them is 343 Guilty Spark, again, who aids the Chief as he has no function to fulfill after the destruction of his Halo from the first one. Traveling through the portal, the humans and elites discover an immense artificial structure known as the Ark, which we've talked about before previously, far beyond the edges of the Milky Way galaxy. Here, Truth can remotely activate all of the Halos within the known universe. Cortana warns that Gravemind, we talked about him before, is trying to rebuild itself on this ring, on this Ark. The Chief, Arbiter, and Johnson travel to Halo's control room to activate the ring. Guilty Spark explains that because the ring is not yet complete, a premature activation will destroy it and the Ark. Johnson doesn't care about this, so of course he ignores his warning, and Guilty Spark fatally wounds him to protect his ring. Why do we keep trusting this thing? Although the Chief destroys Guilty Spark, Johnson soon, I'm just going to skip over that part. I feel like that's spoiler territory. Even though I said that there was going to be spoilers, but Chief activates the ring and escapes the ring's self-destruction on the UNSC frigate Forward Unto Dawn. There was an animated movie based on Forward Unto Dawn. It's a good one. However, the force of Halo's blast causes the slipspace portal to collapse, resulting in only the front half of Forward Unto Dawn, who was carrying the Arbiter at this time, making it back to Earth. The rear half drifts into unknown space, which, of course, that's where Master Chief is. Cortana drops a distress beacon, but acknowledges it may be many years before they are rescued. As the Master Chief enters cryonic sleep, Cortana confides in him that she will miss him, but he comforts her by telling her, "Wake me when you need me." And with, even though I'm ending with Halo 3 here, Halo 3 ended the timeline, so to speak, but the last two games, as we talked about, was ODST and Halo Reach, with this being the end of the Bungie area. And as they went on, like I said, after Halo 3 to work on, or actually after Reach and ODST, they went on to develop their own franchise, which would be known as Destiny. On June 19th, 2000, on the 9th anniversary of Bungie's founding, this is how Bungie got its start, Microsoft announced that it had acquired Bungie and that Bungie would become part of the Microsoft game division. Halo would be developed as an exclusive first-person shooter title for the Xbox. The reasons for Bungie accepting Microsoft's offer were pretty varied. I feel like at this point, developers just wanted to be associated with a particular system at this point, because the lines were getting drawn in the sand with, PlayStation, Nintendo, Xbox, PC, stuff like that. Jason Jones, who was one of the co-founders, stated about this deal is, I don't remember the details exactly, and this is a quote, "It was all a blur. We've been talking to people for years and years before we even published Marathon, which was a shooter game that they developed years before. Activision made a serious offer, but the chance to work on Xbox, the chance to work with a company that took the game seriously, was great at the time, I guess. Before that, we were worried that we'd get bought out by someone who just wanted Mac ports or didn't have a clue on video game development. This was still the early games of video game development, and a lot of people seeing money involved in video games, but also not understanding how to develop video games. Keep in mind, and I've said this before, video games are a business. And when people see money to be made in this, if you call it an art form, they're going to nickel and dime the customer base and alter the games to maximize the financial return on their investments. It's just the way it goes. You may have some pure games out there that are made strictly for, art's sake, or strictly for, just, I want to make a game out there that speaks about something, or maybe it's just a fun game to be had. But arguably, people with deep pockets want to make money. And at this time, we started to see video games making a lot of money at this time. Martin O'Donnell, who, as you know, is the franchise's most iconic composer, had joined Bungie as an employee 10 days before the merger was announced. Co-founders Alex Serapian and Jones had refused to accept Microsoft's offer until the entire studio agreed to the buyout, which is really nice, because I want to say, I don't think Bungie at this time was a really big team. I want to say they were about maybe 20, 25, 30 people big, which is crazy to think about now, to see that Bungie is probably got like well over 100 employees now. So this deal had went on for almost 7 years. On October 1st, 2007, Microsoft and Bungie announced that Bungie was splitting off from its parent company and became a privately held limited liability company named Bungie LLC. As outlined in a deal between the two, Microsoft would retain a minority stake and continue to partner with Bungie on publishing and marketing both Halo and future projects, with the Halo intellectual property still belonging to Microsoft at this point. Which I don't think Bungie really cared much about at this point, because I think they just wanted to move on and do their own thing. So within this time, Bungie planned on revealing a new game at E3 2008. Bungie studio head Harold Ryan at this time announced that the unveiling was canceled, and 3 months later, they announced that a prequel, an expansion to Halo 3 titled Halo 3 Recon was coming out. Of course, the next month, they changed the name from Recon to ODST. The next year, in 2009, Bungie and Microsoft revealed the company was developing another Halo-related game, Halo Reach, for release that next year in 2010. Reach was going to be the last game in the Halo franchise to be developed by Bungie. So it was like a swan song for Bungie as they moved on to, I guess one could argue, maybe greener pastures. These last two games were part of the deal between Bungie and Microsoft, in that Microsoft said, you need to make 2 more Halo games before we finalize this split. At this time, Bungie was like, okay, let's knock 2 games out. They didn't really specify what kind of games. They just said 2 Halo games. I said this earlier. Bungie split into 2 teams to crank out ODST and Reach, so they came out almost a year apart from each other, thus ending the Bungie era of Halo. 343 Studios would be formed to take on the Halo franchise moving forward, and they were developed by Microsoft. They ended up developing Halo 4 for the 360 in 2012, and then on to Halo 5 Guardians in 2015 for the Xbox One. And then, of course, Halo Infinite all the way into 2021 for the Xbox Series X and S systems. In between there were other games produced. There was like real-time strategy games like Halo Wars 1 and 2 that were tie-ins to the overall lore. I think there were a couple I think there was one like twin stick shooter game for phones, but nothing really, groundbreaking or big that, Halo fans really. I mean, the real-time strategy games were kind of like a niche thing. It expanded on the lore a little bit, but it wasn't, as big or as, widely marketed like the mainline Halo titles, so to speak. So if you're familiar with LAN parties, Halo was one of the biggest games that popularized these events. We saw, I think a little bit before this time, we got to see big 4-player GoldenEye LAN parties, but it didn't have system link functionality like the Xbox did, the original Xbox did. Halo Combat Evolved at this time when it came out included 5 competitive multiplayer modes, which you can customize for between 2 to up to 16 players. And of course, it was 4-player split screen. You can play on one Xbox. And if you wanted to play with 16 players, you can join using a system link feature that allows up to 4 Xbox consoles to be connected together in a local area network, which is what LAN stands for. Halo lacks, it's not like you're playing against bots. They didn't have anything like that in the Halo game at all, Halo Combat Evolved. And this Halo was released before Xbox Live online multiplayer service was really even a thing. The ability to connect online for a home console was still, it wasn't even a thing. It wasn't even, if you wanted to connect to play online games, that was what your PC was for, because your PC was already connected to the internet anyway. At this time, obviously, LAN parties are needed to reach the game's 16-player limit. If you go Google, Google images of Halo LAN parties, and you're going to see a wide range of, different types of like claustrophobic type of experiences and images of a bunch of, kind of probably sweaty dudes, these TVs giving off so much heat. The Xbox is giving off so much heat. God, it must have been hot, in some of these, especially big, small, tight area ones. It was a glorious time. I've been to some of these parties, and granted, it would get a little warm in there, of course, but it was still a fun time. Amongst the 5 titles that I talked about, many of the famous multiplayer modes that were very popular was Slayer, which was your standard kill everyone on the map mode. This was, I would say, pretty much what most everybody played, because it was easy. You just jump in and your objective is just kill everybody from the other team. They also included Tactical Slayer, which had players with no shields and headshot kills only. And I loved playing Tactical Slayer in some of the earlier ones because it kind of leveled the playing field a little bit. You couldn't just like jump and willy-nilly shoot. You had to be tactical with it, which it's in the name. This was my favorite mode at the time. A lot of people didn't like playing it because I think they just wanted to kind of be chaotic a little bit and just like running and gunning and just destroying everything. You died a lot though if you played against guys that were good, because if you nailed headshots, whew. Capture the flag, which is an obvious mode. Teams capture enemy flags and take them back to the bases to get points. Stronghold, which requires teams to hold like 3 points on the map. It's basically like capture and hold, so to speak. Firefight, which was a co-op horde wave game that was pretty big in ODST. That was not necessarily a multiplayer mode, but it was like kind of like a co-op against computer AI mode, which was a lot of fun actually, especially if you didn't want to jump into the chaos of like multiplayer at the time and playing against guys that are just like way better than you. And of course, Forge. We can't not talk about Forge, which this was introduced in Halo 3, and it had players create and customize their own maps, gameplay modes, multiplayer modes, and even weapon drops. So you can like put where vehicles spawn, where vehicles are hidden, weapons, stuff like that. Like, and that kickstarted so much of the popularity of Halo 3 and made playing multiplayer, especially if you connected with friends and connected with their maps, um, having it be just almost endless amounts of fun. And one would argue, I would say, I don't think anybody could probably go against me with this. Halo 3 had the best multiplayer modes out of the entire quintilogy. Like, I mean, still to this day, I would say, and opinions like this are subjective. It depends on where you were in the time of when you played it. One could say like, well, if you had the most fun playing Halo 2 multiplayer, then that's your favorite. But I would say, almost objectively, I think a lot of people loved and enjoyed Halo 3 multiplayer more. More people enjoyed that than most of the other Halo games out there. And obviously, what these LAN parties required, like I said, were for these 16-player multiplayer events, you needed at least 3 TVs, which were CRT TVs at the time. These are like 20, 30-pound large box TVs. I mean, if you know what I'm talking about, you know. And of course, 3 Xboxes. So if it's like 4 players were tied to 1 Xbox, 1 TV. These TVs, like I said, were immensely heavy, and especially if you had a larger TV in the 20 to 30 inch range, which at the time, 30-inch TV was huge. This required at least 1 or 2 guys, like 2 guys, to help lift some of these things. Space was also an issue, so you couldn't just like slide this onto a coffee table. You had to find a table or a TV stand that could support the weight of a 20, 30-pound TV. So cramming into your buddy's basement felt pretty claustrophobic, but when you think about it, you're playing with your close friends. You made new ones. Everybody was there kind of having fun doing the same thing. So, unless there was a guy in the room where you just absolutely hated, from the get-go, but you're meeting new people, and this is as much a social environment as a gaming environment. You're talking to people. You're probably sitting next to people you've never met before, and you just kind of bond over playing games. So obviously you're being surrounded by buddies with TVs, Xboxes, cans and bottles of soda, pizza boxes, bags of chips, other candies, other snacks covering the floors. You had the workings of not only good times, but good memories. Like, really, broadband internet was still coming out in these early 2000s, and there were no online multiplayer modes for console at this time, especially Halo 1. Xbox Live would come out when Halo 2 would be released, and which was Microsoft's intent with the Xbox when it was first built. The Xbox was built with the idea that basically the system would be connecting online and had built-in hardware for it. They just needed to work on the network and all the behind-the-scenes stuff. Unfortunately, for PlayStation at the time, with PlayStation 2, you had to buy an extension for it, whereas with the Xbox, it was nice because it was already built in. So Microsoft knew what they were doing when they built this thing. Albeit it was a shaky launch for them, but if you watch their documentary that they did a couple years ago, like, it's actually really interesting deep dive into how the initial Xbox came about. So we didn't really see true online multiplayer until Halo 2 came out, and my God, boy, was Halo 2 an event, a world event. If you were there, that was a sight to behold. When it first released on November 9th, 2004, which, crazy enough, I'm looking at the date right now, was 21 years ago, almost to the day I'm recording this. More than 7,000 retailers around the United States participated in a midnight release, and probably hundreds and hundreds of more all over the world. The biggest one at this time was held at a Toys R Us in Times Square, New York. And if you YouTube video of Halo 2 midnight release, you're probably going to see a lot of clips of Times Square and just seeing the droves of people that lined up waiting for this game. And I ended up finding a NBC News article from back then, dated November 10th, 2004. So it was a little bit of a follow-up to how it happened over there. And I'm going to read. Since game developers Bungie and Microsoft announced the November 9th launch date back in May, the game has racked up over 1.5 million pre-orders. At this time, it was priced at $49.99 or $54.99 for the collector's edition, which was the Steelbook, which I still have. The pre-orders represent a hit nothing short of phenomenal in gaming and entertainment history. When you think about it, this game came out over 20 years ago, and the game prices were relatively the same. So the fact that we're jumping from $50 to eventually, as the generations went on, to $60, and then now we're seeing some of these AAA games being $70. It's adjusting to inflation a little bit. So inside Toys R Us is a swanky Halo 2 launch party. Microsoft's Peter Moore eagerly worked the crowd of assorted celebrities and gathered media. Moore, at this time, was the corporate vice president of worldwide marketing and publishing for the home and entertainment division of Microsoft and is an anomaly in his own right. A corporate executive that actually has facial recognition. To Halo fans, he's probably better known than their local congressman. He said, quote, "I've been in this business for 5 or 6 years, and I've never seen a single title get this much attention. Halo Nation is a fascinating cultural phenomena," he said. And I agree with that 100%. And this phenomena, according to Moore, is nothing less than revolutionary as far as redefining the entertainment industry. Moore goes on to say, "One of the things we'll look back on in 24 hours is what size is the industry. It is very clear to us that this kind of entertainment is usurping others. There was a commotion about the film The Incredibles making $70 million over the weekend. I guarantee we'll make that by 4 p.m. tomorrow." The excitement ran up and down Manhattan in the hours leading up to midnight. At an EB Games on 14th Street, the atmosphere was a bit more mellow up the road, but the fans equally intense. Sitting in a deck chair at the front of the line was Anthony Cintron. He had been in line since 9 a.m. that day. He says, quote, "I told my wife when I left that, 'I love you, honey, but I'll be taking the day off,' he said." Nearby, Marcos Lemos had almost been waiting as long. And in the excitement of pre-launch festivities, Lemos had a confession to make to this reporter. He had downloaded the pirated French version of Halo 2 last week, but he quickly deleted it. Can you imagine downloading this whole game at this time with that internet speed? God, it must have taken a day or two. He said, quote, "They spent so much time on the product and it was unfair to ruin their hard work." How many products at this time, the article goes on, boost this type of loyalty? It was at the Toys R Us in Times Square, site of Halo 2's official event, that the scene represented not so much a launch, but a happening. Microsoft employees loaded with swag started working the lines. They're handing out hats. A giant neon red and blue Halo 2 clock over the line ticked away at the remaining hours left before the game would be officially released. As the crowd chanted 3, 2, 1, the clock indicated exactly 1 hour to go, and it was 11 p.m., and by now the line was 7 people wide and a block and a half long. Near the front of the line, clad head to toe in the armor of Halo 2 Hero Master Chief, was Jim Cush, who came out to Times Square right out of work. He said, "I changed in my car so people at work wouldn't see me," he admitted. The line was predominantly male, with a couple girlfriends and the occasional girl gamer in attendance. I mean, this was, still male men dominate the video game space, obviously, at this time. While the average age seemed to be in their mid-20s, they were a couple old-timers, relatively speaking. And I hate that I'm considered an old-timer, I think, in this speak. John Herrera was here with his 13-year-old son, Matthew. He said, quote, "He told me that he's taking the day off from school tomorrow. And I'm cool with it for one day." At one surreal moment, a pickup truck loaded with cameras and lighting equipment and pulling a bicycle pedicab slowly moved down Broadway parallel to the line. Showtime at this time was shooting a show, and they had stumbled accidentally into the equivalent of a lion's den. In this pedicab, Kim Cattrall, who was played as Samantha on Sex and the City TV show, whose face bore the shock one would expect of a sexy celeb running head-on into 1,000 or so unshaven 25-year-old males. I think that's a dig. She quickly exited and then into a nearby town car, and of course a lot of people are screaming her name and stuff and whatever. More people interviewed. "Halo has changed my life," Robert Carballo said. The bare-chested blue man admitted later, "I'm just so lost in the excitement here. I'm just realizing how many people love this game. When you see these people in person, it's so wild that it's got this big following." Caraballo added that he had just been laid off earlier that day and called it the best day of his life because he would have more time to play Halo 2. But that's just another indication of how unworldly the Halo 2 culture is. When this reporter relayed the story of the Halo fan who had deleted his pirated copy of Halo 2 out of guilt, Microsoft's Moore rapidly nodded his head in understanding. "For these people, it's like stealing the Bible. It's that sacred," said Moore. who then recounted how he went through the online message boards after the incident and read of Halo fans renouncing the piracy or saying that while they will download the illegal version, they will still buy the legal copy. It was obvious now why Microsoft had chosen the busiest district in the entertainment capital of the world for its launch of Halo 2. Microsoft wanted to prove that video gaming was no longer a hobby to be ashamed of, like, say, running trains in the garage or participating in Civil War reenactments. No, they wanted to show that video game is a major player, if not the top player in the nation's entertainment industry. And as I did before, the crowd ticked down the seconds to midnight. 3, 2, 1. And then the giant overhead Halo clock reached 0, and a new message appeared for the faithful. At long last, the battle hits home. Halo 2 has landed. And if you were around at this time, you may remember Peter Moore got the release date of Halo 2 tattooed on his right arm. It had suffered a couple delays, and I think to gain confidence in his fan base, in the Halo fan base, he had tattooed the release date along with the Halo logo on his right arm and unveiled it live on camera for everybody to see as November 9th. Halo 2 at this time had a robust multiplayer on launch, so long as you had an Xbox Live subscription and really good internet, of course. Of course, not a lot of us had good internet at this time, so the LAN party still reigned king as the preferred way to play against your friends. And I would argue that while the video games making millions, if not billions of dollars nowadays, not being relatively new, over 20 years ago, many wouldn't have even guessed it could eclipse movies as the biggest entertainment medium. And I would wager that even non-gamers at this time knew what Halo 2 was. It was that big. At this time, I waited in line for Halo 2 at my local GameStop. And while midnight releases were a relatively new thing at this time, this was arguably the first one that I remember being as huge as it was. I got there a couple hours early because I had heard, like, there's a lot of pre-orders for this game. There's going to be a lot of people waiting in line. And I honestly didn't believe it was going to be as big as it was. I don't think I got out of that line for a couple hours. Further in the future, obviously, we got other great big midnight releases from the likes of like Call of Duty, Madden, FIFA, Pokemon, so many others that I don't think I could have touched what Halo could do at this time. Later on, when Halo 3 was announced, I was working at EB Games here in Wisconsin. And of course, we needed all hands on deck to work the midnight release because we had tons of pre-orders and a lot of people, were going to be lining up. I had my copy pre-ordered too, so obviously when I was done with my shift, I was going home with it, so I wasn't too worried. But Halo 3 was huge at this time too, and I would say it almost was bigger than the Halo 2 event. Massive events worldwide, now with celebrity appearances, and more than 10,000 stores across the United States alone were participating in midnight release. This game had come out on September 25th, 2007. There was actually a funny story in New Zealand. Was the first country to officially release the game. They held an event in the capital, Auckland, and included a 1-ton block of ice with 50 game discs frozen inside. And the public could attempt to free it by shooting it with water pistols. Oh, man, that must have taken a long time. My experience working the Halo 3 midnight release here was honestly pretty wholesome and hilarious. Being there, even when I was there for the Halo 2 release, you were amongst people that, probably widely different than you in many ways. You're becoming best friends and bonded over the shared love of this game, this Halo franchise. Games like this actually remind me every day that while as people we can be widely different by some aspects and some spectrums, we're all still the same in many aspects. We still love the things that we love. We can break down walls and barriers and seek understanding when just bonding over shared loves and interests. We all joked at this event, Halo 3. We all laughed. We weren't subjected to bullying because, of course, at this time, still admitting to others, especially if you were over the age of 12, that you played video games in high school or even in your mid-20s was considered pretty taboo and childish. I remember working at EB Games, and occasionally, like it wouldn't happen that often, but sometimes guys would just walk into the store, look around, rip on the employees and the staff, see us that we're not staffed by 12-year-olds or whatever like that, and then leave, validating their pathetic existence by putting down others. But it was kind of weird because it was like, okay, dude, if you feel better about yourself, enjoy the rest of your day. We were an inclusive group, people that played video games, and I can attest that at these midnight events, it wasn't chaotic or crazy. It was, there wasn't any fighting or anything like that, at least that I was part of. I mean, maybe other people feel different, but it was fun and exciting. And thinking back, this is where the Halo franchise in this time was really lightning in a bottle by some aspects. Massive cooperative multiplayer games were pretty new at this time. We saw a lot of fun with GoldenEye, like I said, but Halo really brought it to the big leagues, to the big time. Big sci-fi stories and a stoic, strong-willed main protagonist and Master Chief was really what many were looking for in video games. These early parts of the Halo franchise had masterful storytelling by writer Joseph Staten and many others, as well as the masterful voice acting by Steve Downes, who's done Master Chief pretty much throughout the entirety of the series, Jen Taylor, who did the voice of Cortana and Dr. Halsey, and of course we can't forget David Sully, who did the voice of Sergeant Major Avery Johnson. I would say I just love his performance almost better than anybody else. The typical Army sergeant, lines that he would deliver. When we got into Halo 2 territory, of course, other developers tried their best to create these Halo killers, which, as I stated earlier in this episode, became kind of like a trade name almost within the video game space. And I want to say it was a thing that I don't think the developers were trying to do. I think they were trying to do what Halo was doing, but you had probably media outlets and magazines that were basically putting the name on it and saying like, "Oh, this is a sci-fi first-person shooter. They're trying to be Halo, or they're trying to be a Halo killer." So I don't think video game developers were intentionally trying to, take over Halo, but they saw the success of what Halo was doing, and then also trying to kind of gain their own success in that. Everyone wanted a piece of that pie, which turned out either okay or just not great for some games and game franchises. I don't think we really saw much success here. The Killzone franchise was supposed to be PS2's answer to the Halo franchise, but didn't really make an impact on the space. Not enough. The Halo killer hit full steam on the PS3, of course, with games like Resistance, Haze, and others that barely made it in sales numbers. But I would say at this time, no one really touched that space that Halo occupied until Call of Duty Modern Warfare hit our consoles and PC in 2007. I would say that was I wouldn't call that the Halo killer, but it came out to say like, hey, there's other really good multiplayer experiences that you can have. And I would say the franchise hit rocky waters after Halo 3 when 343 Studios taken the helm with many mixed results. Right now, we have Halo Infinite on the Xbox Series X and S systems, and while having a largely active multiplayer scene, it really doesn't hit anywhere near the levels or popularity of these earlier titles that I was talking about today. Competition is good for the industry as a whole, and I feel that if we really didn't have Halo hitting such big numbers in those times, in those early days, we wouldn't have nearly the level of competitiveness that brought us big multiplayer games now to this day. We wouldn't have a lot of the games be as big as they are if it wasn't Halo. If it wasn't for Halo doing its thing and really just hitting the ground running when it came out. Especially at this time of exclusivity, which was king at this time, with selling hardware, when the lines were blurry, if anything, with which system had the better graphics. I mean, tech-wise, under the hood, Xbox was the most powerful system at this time. It was really the exclusive games that sold the hardware. Nintendo already had a massive head start compared to Sony and Microsoft at this time. And also, with Mario, Star Fox, Metroid, Zelda, all those big, franchises and all those big icons. And of course, at this time, we were watching Sega fall into becoming a third-party publisher and out of the hardware space, which is unfortunate, much to the dismay of all of us at this time who grew up with Sega systems in our house. It was a sad time. Master Chief was the iconic brand that Xbox and Microsoft needed to sell systems, and it cemented itself as a major player in the video game space right out of the gate. Kind of similar to how PlayStation did Sony did with the original PlayStation. Xbox came out with, Master Chief as a icon and as a mascot almost. And yeah, Xbox 360, we saw something similar. They came out guns blazing with Halo 3 and user-friendly multiplayer experiences that many of us, at the time could now begin to enjoy. Mascots and icons were paramount, in the video games. And unfortunately, it seems like with the waters being muddy and more games becoming more multi-platform than anything, I feel like we've lost a little bit of that. I feel like we've lost that along the way, because the more games go on multiple platforms, maybe the better it is for developers. So I'll admit that my time with the Halo games stayed primarily with the campaigns. I didn't have good internet until Halo 3 came out, and of course, at this time I was hard in cutting my teeth in Rainbow Six Vegas. I was craving realistic gameplay at this time, I think over the sci-fi chaos that Halo 3 had. Although I was still, when I was playing Halo 1 and 2, I was there at the LAN parties. I was bringing my Xboxes, and I had an 18-inch TV, so it was a little bit easier to transport compared to some other dudes that were bringing 25 inches. Um, Getting together with friends, even doing 2v2 multiplayer games on one TV. We had to sit pretty close to the TV in order to see what was going on, but it was still tons of fun. I made friends during these times, especially when the parties got bigger and bigger. The friend with the biggest basement, unfortunately, was where we met up at. Unfortunately, it was just kind of how it goes. I mean, admittedly, when I was in my early 2000s, like a lot of us had apartments at this time, so we, none of us had basements. And it was not like we could, in these apartments that we had, it's not like we could be loud as hell all the time. So the friends of ours that had houses or maybe still lived with their parents at the time, that's where we played. Saturday nights were spent caffeinated up with Mountain Dew. It's the stereotype is absolutely true. We were caffeinated with Mountain Dew, fed with pizza, junk food to the wee hours of Sunday morning. I do have fond memories of Mountain Dew Game Fuel, which unfortunately we haven't seen this year. I don't know what PepsiCo is doing right now, but yeah, we're not seeing a Game Fuel. But the first Mountain Dew Game Fuel that we had, which was a citrus cherry flavor, was first introduced with the launch of Halo 3. And it's my favorite Mountain Dew flavor to this day. Like, it would only release around fall every year, ever since the advent of Halo 3 release, but I would get it every year. I think I still have one or two in my fridge from last year. And some of the funniest parts were always like, it was always hilarious when one of us were too tired to keep playing when we got to like the wee hours of the morning, and you would start the match and you would see their character not moving. And you look over to see them passed out with a controller in their hand. You always think like, I'm just going to close my eyes for like a minute while this loads, and then you don't wake up. Trash talking at this time wasn't really insulting. Like, you weren't like throwing racial slurs at everybody, like, the anonymity that you get with online multiplayer. It was friendly and competitive, and you never took it personally. You're just razzing each other. You were just giving each other crap. This was where famous catchphrases became popular. Everybody's got different ones that you would say. Basically, like, somebody would say it like on a whim, and then all of a sudden it became like repeated over and over and over again until you killed it. One for me in particular that always happened every time was echoing what the multiplayer narrators would always say. You would scream out lines like "double kill" and "overkill." Like, it was so fun to repeat those really loud, and it was just like a form of trash talk even too. What I loved about the Halo franchise at this time was its story, its lore, its characters. When I talk about I cut my teeth more in the campaign, the stakes were always high. And while at this, playing as Master Chief, you were one of the most powerful soldiers in the human military in these games. You still felt helpless though, and lost at most every turn due to the overwhelming odds the story presented you. You weren't this overpowered machine that destroyed everything in its wake and ended every game with a happy, feel-good ending. You were always trying to finish the fight, which became one of Halo's most iconic lines. I mean, it's like every game ended fine, but it was like you were still losing at the same time. Like, it was kind of bleak almost in a way. It wasn't like happy, feel good, like, hey, you defeated the entire Covenant army. Now humanity can live happily ever after. No, the fight keeps going. And as we're thinking right now with the future of Halo not necessarily being bleak, but sad for those of us that were there at the beginning and had fond memories of these times. And at this time, we had hope for a future where Halo would always remain dominant. Thinking about it, it tickled my nostalgia. It even made me melancholy that young kids these days won't experience times like those ever. While, the kids are experiencing different things now that we didn't experience at the time. It was just like, I don't know, it was just a magical time of just like being with people in the same room, which I think is an underrated concept that we're taking for granted now, with everybody being able to connect with each other so easily now online through phones, through internet, through streaming. It's just, it's different when, and a lot of you can attest probably, it's different when you're in a room crowded with people and like interacting face to face with people than just online. With technology changing rapidly in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was a magical time of innovation, a booming economy that was pushing the boundaries of what video games could do. And one could argue that Master Chief himself was on the front lines of that push. So that's a way to send that off on a grand note there. Sorry, I'm just sometimes impressed with the notes that I write for myself, and I'm like, ooh, I wonder how that's going to sound when I say it. So I got to shout out my Retro XP Discord community for sharing some of their stories of the Halo franchise when they were younger. When I saw the Campaign Evolve trailer, I kind of went to my Discord group and I kind of shot a message to everybody. I'm like, what's everyone feeling about this? Like, especially the people that have maybe been playing video games at the time or even like cut your teeth on Halo when you guys were younger. Like, tell me about your experiences. Tell me what what you were doing, if you were playing Halo at the time. And I got quite a few that I want to read. So within the Discord community, the username PhilJustPhil said I spent so much time in Halo, both alone and with friends. This will probably be repeated, but LAN parties were hands down the best. While I love modern multiplayer convenience, sometimes something about having everyone in the same place made it feel more special, I guess. Someone swiped the rocket launcher from under you and destroyed your Warthog. You could actually look over them and disgust. Spotting someone across the map who snuck into your base and made off with your flag during capture the flag would send the team into a panic, and screaming would quickly follow. Who left the door unguarded? Why didn't you call for backup? Are they using our own Warthog? I love this. Also, between rounds, when everyone was waiting to ready up, someone would fire up the demo for Fusion Frenzy at the perfect time. Okay, guys, we're almost ready. Is everyone set? Then from the next room, all you would hear is Fusion Frenzy blaring out from the demo screen. Always made for a laugh. Sometimes you would have to wait for a while to let the game kind of launch. So there was plenty of time in between to maybe launch a quick game of something. So RYRYJK said, those early days of Halo LAN parties were a magical time. That's how I found most of my gaming buddies that I still play online games with today. When we can find the time, since we're all old and have too many responsibilities. That's always so really cool to hear, that it's like the people that you meet, you may not have met in person, but you've known them for years, and you met through this game. It's crazy to think about. There was something special about the little community that would hang together and bring whatever consoles, controllers, or TVs that they had. We were also able to install it on the computers in my high school computer lab and go play matches during lunch. That was so cool. Tony Pepperoni said, I remember starting ODST back when I was a little and with my, at the time, stepbrother, and not realizing what I was getting into. Then going from that to Reach. I think Reach still, hands down, my favorite Halo. Tony, I agree with you. So many hours of fun at my dad's on the weekends. Phil E. said, Halo came out my freshman year of college, which I think Phil, you're around my age. Weirdly, it never took off in my dorm, but the summer after, back home, we played a ton of 4-player multiplayer. Blood Gulch sniping for the win. I brought a 32-inch TV my parents handed down from the dorm's freshman year. It barely fit on the dresser we used as a stand, but everyone wanted to play games in our room because we had the, quote, big screen. To think 32 inches was a big TV at the time. So Judge Tempest posted a picture of, it wasn't a personal picture, but it was a picture of a LAN party of just like a bunch of like flat TV, flat tables with TVs and like at least 20 people in this room. And he posted and said, this pic takes me back. Me and friends used to have LAN parties in our tool shed that we converted to a hangout room. Stuffed 20 bros in there, and we just ripped on each other for endless hours. Some of the best gaming days. And while like I said, online multiplayer is very convenient because you could just jump on real quick. You don't have to like arrange dates, or you don't have to arrange logistics of getting your equipment to and from whatever. But so you could play multiplayer more often now with the ease and convenience of, the internet. At this time, you had a lot of magical memories just I mean, any event or any space where you're sharing experiences with other people in the same room with you, seeing and experiencing and witnessing the same things like in person with you, it's always a different experience than doing it online. Like, there's not a lot of people I imagine that share great stories about like, oh, this happened when I was playing online multiplayer, and it's a fleeting memory a little bit, but like when you're with people, it becomes more of an iconic memory because other people were there physically with you, and that's a different experience than just playing online. Which, not knocking online, like I said, it's a very convenient way to get on, and I'm loving the convenience of it. But like I said, just being in a physical space with other people, it's a whole different experience. So that's the early days of Halo in a nutshell, albeit a very large nutshell. It was a spark that kicked off the epic storytelling that we're still seeing in video games to this day, and revolutionized multiplayer gaming with friends. And of course, as you've heard in the comments I've talked about recently, becoming a great place to meet lifelong friends. Be sure to follow me on my socials on X, Threads, and Instagram at RetroXPodcast. And whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on, be sure to follow and enable notifications so you can find out when I drop a new episode. Episodes are also live on YouTube, and follow me there as well at RetroXPodcast. I also want to thank the Hair of the Dogcast Network for allowing me in their group of shows, and consider contributing to us on Patreon at patreon.com/hairofthedogcast and join the community, where you can get access to early episodes every week. Thanks for listening, guys.